My next guest is a very unusual woman. She's an expert in metaphysics. Now, I tend to avoid that subject, and I know it's controversial, but I find this person to be extremely interesting and have an unusual take on the subject of letting go. So I invite you to enjoy listening to Dr. Anneli Driessen. Dr. Driessen is also an author. Her newest book is Ultimate Success: 7 Secrets to Spiritually Based Leadership.
You are watching Profonde TV with host Phyllis Haynes.
Anneli, you have done an enormous amount of work, but it seems that you're on to an interesting subject.
Mm-hmm.
I was fascinated with your discussion in a recent newsletter about letting go.
Mm-hmm.
What prompted you to do this? What brings you to this topic?
It's very interesting. One was it that I felt intuitively that this is something I want to focus on this year. And then we received a letter from the Beyond that this year was declared as the year to let go. And then I did a few spiritual roundtables and we discussed the matter, and I got a deeper and deeper understanding what this really means. And so I'm very excited about it. And it's going to be the theme of our next newsletter as well.
Well, what do you mean by letting go?
Letting go can be, peripherally understood as, letting go of old clothes or, a car or maybe a toxic relationship. But there is much more to it than that. Letting go is, also meant to look at and to discern when you have things like emotions that don't serve you anymore, like anger or resentment or even grief. And there is a place and a time where it's really important to let go and to move on. I'm just thinking about, like a river. The river flows and has a lot of power, but when something comes and stops it, then the water has to find some other ways, and it loses its power. It could create some areas of flooding that, are not serving you. And I was thinking that's a really neat analogy that probably everyone can relate to. So when we have things in life that block us, that again don't serve us any longer, or that make our life real miserable and difficult, it's time to think and to analyze and then to say, well, what is my next step? What are the short-term pains for me to let go for better things to happen later on? It could be like a job you're in that's really has a very toxic environment, or could be even, I just talked to someone who lives in a house with very, very difficult neighbors. And maybe at some point in time, there is time for you to get the message to move on. And that's something everyone has to decide for themselves. So that is sort of a very basic thought I have about letting go.
Well, you come to this idea through, as you said, a letter from beyond. What did you mean by a letter from beyond?
Yeah, this is very, very interesting. About 1995, I met a most unusual medium in Germany called Medium Manuela. And she is an exclusive channel for a teacher in the Beyond by the name of Theobald, or Theobald, you would say in English. And I checked it out. I did not have any much faith in any kind of mediumship. I studied it quite extensively and didn't find that, for the most part, people were just giving their opinions, people who were just usually very loving and kind, but really didn't have that much knowledge and wanted to help. They were at most sensitives, but they call themselves medium. And so this particular woman, originally very shy, she hardly even looked at myself when I met her. She worked in a very, very poor environment as a cook. But her transmissions were very interesting. She wrote from right to left and upside down, which was most unusual. And so I asked a lot of questions, and then I got the answers in writing. And I was just shocked at the accuracy of and useful advice I received. And it really startled me a lot. And I knew that this must be the greatest thing I've ever experienced in life. But then when I left, doubts came in. So, God, we have about 200 of these guys in Victoria. Why would I, even bother? Because then I would need to travel to Germany and all that. Just to summarize, I was told by Theobald that I should come back a few months later and meet halfway between where they lived in South Germany and where I lived with my brother. So we did that. And there it was just absolutely mind-blowing. And I was told that I need to create a group in Victoria where we can discuss this information. It resonated very well, but again, I was, somewhat hesitant. Then half a year later, I spent 3.5 weeks at the medium's home. It was very, very simple. I slept on a two-seater, like a love seat. There was no bed. There was no room to clear out my clothes from my suitcase. I fed the dog. I drove out the French fries in the evening. I cleaned the bathrooms and vacuumed the floor in the little restaurant. I was very, very poor. And yet when this lady, Manuela, had time, she would sit with me and I then had more questions. And I gathered and gathered and gathered information, which I have now over several thousand of documents. And I went back to Europe. By the way, she lives now near Vienna in Austria. I went back many times, probably about 20 times, invested all my money and time in researching and documenting and writing this down. And my God, it was life-changing. For about 10 years, I lived almost like a hermit. I was up at 2, 3 in the night, asking more questions, more clarification, and found out a lot of information about our life here, about the universe, about illnesses, about our future. And it was absolutely mind-boggling.
So let me interrupt you to say, as I understand you, this meeting with this woman in Europe brought you closer to what you now do, which is you have created a metaphysical school, a place where people can study metaphysical works.
Right.
And so this is what was the pivotal experience that brought you to this.
Correct, yes.
So that when you say you received a letter from beyond, this letter from beyond through a medium is telling you that letting go is the topic for you now.
It's for all of us in this planet, apparently. So it's a big thing. And that's why I published it in our newsletter. Just to let you know about those so-called letters, these are spontaneous transmissions that occur, and apparently they are genetically coded exactly towards the time where we are able to receive them. I would like to say something very important that those who study this phenomena of mediumship will understand. The contact was initiated by the beyond through the medium, not the other way around. A lot of times people now, get certificates to become medium, and it doesn't work unless you have a God-given gift. This is not going to serve you. You may attract entities that are very questionable or have two sides to them, or certainly are not in a very, very high level. And so I have studied this phenomenon quite a bit and discovered a lot about it.
Well, forgive me Anneli, I certainly understand your passion, and I know of the specialness of the school that you run. I have certainly interviewed you in the past, and I'm pleased to talk to you. But I'm still a skeptic. I mean, I have to say, there are a lot of practitioners out there, and many of them are phonies, as you know.
I know.
So,
and
why is it that there's still this gap between science and what it is that you do? Why is there still this gap?
You know, there is not that much gap. If you learn from some of the more courageous and advanced scientists, they even say that there is not much difference between metaphysics and physics, if any. So, but I wanted to ask you or tell you something else, because you mentioned that why is it that so many people are, not trustworthy or not credible? So, sort of, you said that. It's a big money-making deal this year. And for sometimes, mediums show up everywhere and everyone thinks, they have a special contact to the beyond. So that's one thing, but there's also something else. I believe that, and I have observed it, that more and more people are awakened to ask questions of a different kind, more fundamental existential questions. Why am I here? What's my purpose? What's my role? What is this all about, this rather chaotic, world that we are in right now? So I think that those two sides, and people try to find answers. And often through prayer or meditation, they have been giving some insights and some truth about the world. So it's not all negative. The intentions are usually good. But when someone becomes very, very famous, sometimes the other side just sort of steps in and focuses on the fame and fortune rather than being truly of service to others. Does that make any sense?
Well, I can hear your work and the thoughtfulness you have behind your work, which is why I wanted to do this interview. So let's go back to the topic at hand, which is letting go. Mm-hmm. Most people get attached to things, or they feel that maybe they shouldn't let go because they should really fight for what they want. How do you know when it's time really to let go?
So that's a wonderful question. The first, I have to back up a little bit. The first thing that needs to happen is that we need to really say yes to what is. Sometimes attachments happen without really having ownership of it or accepting it. And so when we can truly receive, we also can let go. It's a spiritual maturation process. And, as I said earlier, on the outside, it looks like simple. We need to let go of stuff, maybe, of, that extra television that we don't need. But really much deeper, it is an acceptance of what is. And then that gives us permission to say, it's fine, I let it go. And the final letting go is at the end of our life, where we let go of life itself. So it's a part of the flow of life that needs to be in harmony and contentment with inside. And as I said, it's a very important decision to make, and it requires discipline.
How so?
When you need to let go of something, let's say a very simple example. Someone is overweight. We try to find the easy way to let go.
Now, you said you weren't going to pick on me, Anneli. So.
No. No, you're not overweight. You're just cuddly. It's good. And I'm sure your husband loves you.
Yeah. Keep going.
But if you're really serious, you say, look, Anneli, I just, it's too much, and then really do something about it. Rather than just running from one fad, expensive diet to another, really do make the lifestyle change. Do control the quality of your food and all this kind of stuff. So that would be a very simple example of why discipline is important to let go.
That's a good example.
I have also another example I'm just thinking of. Would you like to hear?
Sure. Yes.
For example, If someone is in the habit of having a very angry opinion about someone, and some people I learned, in my clinical practice who just nurse this like for years and years and years. You may be correct that that individual that you have a hard time with is not the best in the world, but as long as you hang on to your anger, you're the one who is trapped. And you're the one who feels all that negativity. So when we talk about discipline, there could be a possibility to get some assistance from a really good coach or a really good clergy person or a really good therapist or a really wonderful, wise friend that you can trust and go to and say, look, I want to let go of this. I need some help. And then get some strategies, some plans in doing this and making it easier. And often just that decision to let go makes already a shift, and the rest are just other things to do.
I'm going to give you a difficult opportunity to talk about that because you live in Canada, so you're not necessarily affected by what is making so many Americans upset. Now, we are a political free zone, so we're not going to even talk about the person. But many, 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 many Americans are really angry and upset right now. Mm-hmm. So how to make their anger more effective, or how to change that? I've even heard that people are dying who are near death are very upset that they are dying before they get to see a change in this current situation. Mm-hmm. So what's your advice on this subject of this huge anger that's going on?
Yeah, I have some thoughts about it. Of course, I don't know if that will apply to everything.
Okay.
Many times when we are angry, we're dealing with a certain type of perception, whether it's correct or not. And that would be one step to look at, to see what are the triggers inside me that get me so upset about this or that individual. Right, and really have some truthful reflection on what that might be. That would be one step, and that is very helpful. Sometimes, people are angry with a certain authority figure, whereas in fact they have unresolved issues, possibly with their father or father figure. Who knows? It could be a lot of things. Another option is something that I have been observing quite a few people doing in the United States and in Europe, by the way, where he also is not liked by many. And that is to pray, to assist in whatever understanding they have, to open themselves up to be accepting, and also to pray for this individual for insight, for guidance, for God's guidance, and to just put out a positive vibration towards the chaos that is there, and maybe even look at some of the positive things he's doing, maybe. And check out also different points of view. The term fake media is a big term also in Europe now. And what is alternative media? What are they saying? And then use your own head and make some judgments. So it is very attractive to be angry, because the gift in anger is being right. And most people want to do that. Also, if you find a group of angry people, you reinforce each other and you feel even more right. But to step back and allow another door to open for possibilities and to review your perceptions, either way, is something that I certainly would encourage everyone to do, those who are the yay-sayers and the naysayers. So critical thinking is what we really emphasize also in the academy. And it's a big, big part. And when you mentioned earlier, Phyllis, that you're still a skeptic about all this medium stuff, I agree. And I always encourage people to keep that skepticism, because that allows for reflection. And if anything that you learn or find out through the transmissions from the beyond or the academy and science, which I introduce, take it. If it doesn't, put it on a shelf and maybe revisit it later. But don't just dismiss it. That's too easy.
One final question, and I hate to end on this point, but what do you do about truly evil things? Or is there such a thing as true evil? That's a question.
Absolutely. That's part of the polarity of life. You just have to look around. You can see it. People say, evil doesn't exist. They are a prime candidate for attacks and potential possessions. So evil does exist. And so what to do? Recognize it exists and recognize it quickly. For example, if you find yourself getting into a very downward spiral mentally, and you know that something is messing with your brain, you can say simply, I have recognized you. I am with God. I am guided by Him, and I'm not going to buy into this. That would be one thing. There are several others that we discuss about spiritual protection. I've written articles on it. We have a whole seminar on, what we can do to maintain as much as possible a positive energy field around us, and at the same time be sensitive to any sort of attacks, and they do exist. There are three things that we found out from the beyond where the negative side messes with us. Number one is to muddle with our thinking. Number two, illness. Number three is money, wealth. So these are three major areas that can get in the way for us to stay focused on what's true and right for us. And many people who have chosen a spiritual path have confirmed with me that these are the areas that they most need to struggle with most of the time.
There's great inequity in the planet also. Mm-hmm. I mean, I know that you come to your work because you have a care for people.
Yes.
There are enormous inequities in this planet. People have very poor lives in many places, starvation and suffering. How is that accounted for? Have you gotten any insight into that?
Oh, yes. You see, not every, there is this phenomena of karma. And, it's not an excuse. They're saying, well, it's just karma, so I don't do anything. This law of cause and effect, which is recognized by pretty much everyone, is extending into other dimensions. And there is this. There is also something that we call free will that is given to us, that sometimes people choose, at least prior to them coming here, that they want to have certain experiences to grow. And then there is something like predetermination, fate. And we need to struggle with that. In addition, we have what I like to refer to as, or what Jung refers to as shadow, which is that part of us that is not so nice. So we need to come to terms with that and work with it so that we keep the upper hand on that. That when we are tempted to maybe get revenge or be revengeful or hurt someone because it just hurt so much what we experienced, these are messages to get that we need to focus again on what is love and what is responsibility. What is that makes the world a little bit better? What is it that makes me a little bit better as a leader, as a teacher, as a mother, as a wife? And then go for that. And then again, the word discipline comes in. It's thinking, decision, and discipline. These would be three of the key characters that I would think are part of the subject of letting go.
Well, I will say that it's an honor to have had a chance to talk with you. I suspect we will have to have a second conversation because it's not the typical show that I do. And I frankly, that I avoid all people in the metaphysical realm. But there was something about you that, having interviewed you a few times in other situations, where I see that you're genuinely committed to this and that you continue to study. Am I right that you continue?
Oh, every day, at least 2 hours, usually more.
Well, I just value knowing you, and I look forward to seeing my mail come in. I'll share with you what responses we get. Is there anything you want to say in closing, Anneli?
Well, thank you, Phyllis. And I hope that my thoughts will stimulate someone's thinking and maybe give some encouragement that we can handle everything here in this world.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Wow, that was an unusual conversation. I really enjoyed that. And I hope you will continue to watch us. I invite you to go to princetontv.org and also listen to all the other great programs that are available to you. Princeton Community Television is a great service to the community, and I enjoy being part of it. So please continue to watch Profonde TV on princetontv.org.